In Afghanistan, a small village is buzzed by a drone, catching the attention of the people living there. They quickly prepare themselves for an incoming attack. Shortly after, a group of American soldiers shows up, only to discover that the entire town is deserted as everyone is hiding indoors. The team is constantly on the move, and when they encounter a suspicious man carrying a bomb, they quickly gather around him, warning that they will shoot him if he doesn't put down the weapon. Initially, the man disregards the warning, but as soon as he realizes the soldiers are serious, he pulls out a gun, which forces the soldiers to shoot him and end his life with a few shots. After spotting the lifeless body and explosive device, Jake informs Colonel Mason and seeks authorization to disable it. However, Mason denies permission, but Jake decides to proceed without his consent and manages to successfully disarm the bomb. Suddenly, an undisclosed second bomb explodes, resulting in the deaths of the majority of the soldiers. The guys quickly exit the buildings and encircle the Americans, shooting their guns and starting a fierce battle. American soldiers are getting injured and killed all around, and only Jake and Mason remain alive. Jake dashes towards his colonel, nearly getting hit by the enemy, but Mason comes to his rescue just in time before a helicopter arrives. After 5 years, Jake is attempting to adjust to life as a regular person and is taking medication to cope with his post-traumatic stress disorder. He now works at a car repair shop owned by Earl and faces the challenge of dealing with demanding customers. After finishing work, Jake returns home to spend quality time with his family. For the sake of his son, he always ensures to maintain a cheerful demeanor. However, when they are alone, tensions arise between Jake and his wife due to their abundance of unpaid bills. However, Jake assures that he will handle the situation as he always does. At bedtime, Jake shows his son a picture and tells a story about his previous group of friends, mentioning how Mason was present at the hospital when the baby was born. Jake is feeling sad that he hasn't talked to Mason for a long time. When the kid asks Jake if he has ever murdered someone, Jake avoids answering the question. The following day, Jake goes to work and discovers a bunch of gangsters demanding money from Earl. Jake attempts to remove them, but the leader Fresh instructs his followers to physically attack Jake. However, Jake effortlessly overpowers all of them using a wrench. Fresh prevents further conflict by displaying his firearm, and he and his gang depart while assuring Jake of a future rematch. Later, Jake talks to Earl and finds out that Earl used to be in a gang like him. However, Earl was lucky enough to leave that life behind and create a place he could call home. Earl assures Jake that he will always keep their neighborhood safe, so Jake doesn't have to be anxious about his family's well-being. He is still involved in a conflict, and he contacts his family to ensure their safety. He listens to his wife, suggesting that he should have notified the police instead of getting involved. In the evening, Jake returns home and notices Fresh sitting in his car, talking about seeking revenge before leaving. Jake is in a state of panic as he hurries into the house. When he realizes that his family has tragically passed away, he becomes overwhelmed with grief and has a complete emotional breakdown. Shortly after, the police show up to inquire about what happened. However, Jake loses control and abruptly leaves in his truck. He drives around the city searching for Fresh's car as his mind recalls his happiest moments with his family. Eventually, he locates the car parked near a rowdy club. In a hurry, Jake enters the club holding a gun and fearlessly starts shooting all the gang members. When the man is on the verge of killing Fresh, he clarifies that he didn't intend to kill Jake's family, but circumstances forced him to do so. However, Jake remains unmoved by this explanation, and Fresh ends up getting shot as well. After 5 months, Jake finds himself imprisoned for his wrongdoing, and his post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, worsens as he constantly imagines Fresh being responsible for the murder of his family. Jake is taken aback when Mason unexpectedly shows up one day, offering assistance to reopen the case. Nevertheless, Jake declines the offer as he firmly believes he belongs where he is, and echoes his earlier statement to the judge that he has avenged himself and feels absolutely no regret about it, to the extent that he would even do it again. Jake then requests Mason to never return and instructs the guard to escort him back to his prison cell. Later that night, Jake reflects on his past in the military and recalls how Mason had saved his life before retiring. After a while, a stranger named Ramsey pays Jake a visit, introducing himself as the leader of a private group assigned with special missions. But Jake interrupts him before he can say anything else and tells the guard to take him away again. Later that night, Jake is dreaming about his family when a group of men wearing masks forcefully enter his cell and drug him before taking him away. After awakening, Jake realizes he is no longer in jail and realizes that Ramsey is the one who abducted him. Ramsey admits to observing Jake for quite a while and is impressed by his accomplishments. Ramsey's group, known as Section 8, operates outside of conventional boundaries, and he believes they can help Jake regain his sense of direction. To wrap things up, Ramsey explains that Jake's son wants to see him as a hero instead of a criminal. This convinces Jake to join the team. Afterwards, in Washington, D.C., Ramsey introduces Jake to the other team members: Elias, Ajax, Brunner, and Muller. Next, he shows him around a place he refers to as the Batcave and shares that they have 8 team members in Washington and 8 others elsewhere in the world. These individuals receive instructions from the State Department and the NSA, which primarily involve dealing with potential dangers to national security. Jake is new to this role, so Muller will accompany him on missions until he becomes more experienced. Additionally, Jake will receive a bank account, an apartment in the city, a vehicle, a background story, and a fake name because everyone thinks he is deceased. After Ramsey departs, the responsibility falls on the team to subject Jake to the initiation process. Ajax begins to taunt him, pushing him and throwing punches. Despite Jake's refusal to fight, he tries his utmost to evade the attacks. However, Ajax's aggression eventually causes Jake to lose his composure and react. He forcefully shoves Ajax down and nearly pokes him in the eye with a pen. However, in that moment, a memory of his loved ones crosses his thoughts, and he becomes more composed. Afterward, Jake departs, and a disappointed Ajax remarks that Jake displayed fear, which suggests he isn't fit for their group. Nonetheless, Muller disagrees with this assessment. After a while, Jake and Muller board a plane and talk about Jake's initial assignment. They need to go after a guy named Castillo, who is both a defense contractor and a weapons dealer. Castillo has managed to obtain some risky plans that he plans to sell to the Russians. It's Jake's task to recover the plans, eliminate Castillo and his crew in the process. Jake understands that the group he is with is basically a team of people who kill others, and he does not want to continue taking part in these killings. Later in the day, the pair successfully reaches Mexico and discovers that Castillo is about to meet a Russian negotiator in a warehouse for a trade. Castillo and the Russian are having an argument, and Jake cleverly moves around unnoticed and silently eliminates a guard. The sound of this act makes both gangs suspicious of the other, causing them to turn against each other. As a result, their disagreement quickly turns into a heated and intense shootout. The members of the gang start to die off one after another, and they even cause a car to explode, which puts an end to the fight. Afterwards, Jake emerges and kills all the remaining survivors. He then investigates the car and finds 2 frightened women inside. Jake disregards them and grabs the schematics before he goes away. Afterwards, at the base, Ramsey reprimands Jake for jeopardizing their mission by leaving those 2 women alive. Jake attempts to justify that they were helpless and accuses Ramsey of not valuing human life. In response, Ramsey warns Jake that he will send him back to prison if he doesn't comply. Afterwards, Jake is fired by Muller. Muller reassures Ramsey that Jake performed well, but Ramsey still has doubts. Ajax interjects and suggests that Ramsey may have made a mistake. When Ramsey is alone, he contacts someone named Locke. The following day in Nevada, a hired soldier named Locke unlawfully enters a hotel and murders several staff members. He then proceeds to a room where he frightens the women present before confronting his intended target. The man acknowledges that Ramsey, the person who ordered Locke's presence, and attempts to bribe him with a significant sum of money. However, Locke chooses to proceed with the killing regardless. Later on, Locke manages to flee through the casino of the hotel, but the guards quickly become suspicious and start chasing him. Locke skillfully defeats all the guards that approach him and starts running, causing damage as he goes and knocking out the guards who persistently pursue him. Finally, he pulls out his gun and fires a few shots in order to create chaos among the gamblers. Additionally, He murders one of the security guards before leaving the premises and stealing a car in order to make his getaway. Meanwhile, Jake settles into his new residence and is taken aback when he discovers a collection of photographs capturing moments from his past in Afghanistan. He recalls a talk he had with Mason where he believed it was his fault for Mason getting hurt, and Mason assured him. Afterwards, Jake is at a bar drinking when Muller approaches him. Jake attempts to gather information from her. Muller doesn't have any knowledge about Ramsey, but she tells them that she used to serve in the military and once fought back against a commanding officer who scolded her. After some time, Ramsey assigns them a new task. They need to obtain classified digital information related to a sensitive case while also eliminating Senator Graham. Turns out Graham is considered a traitor to the country, having bribed numerous individuals to evade justice. The security measures will be extremely tight, so Ramsey emphasizes to everyone, particularly Jake, that they must defend themselves. After a few hours, the group successfully reaches Graham's location and attempts to eliminate as many guards as possible. However, the increased security becomes aware of the situation and transfers Graham in a van to a different place. As Muller hacks into the senator's computer, Jake tries to catch Graham but fails despite shooting some bullets. The van is too quick, so Jake takes a faster route by jumping over a hill and successfully stops the van on the road. A guard attempts to confront him, but Jake swiftly takes him down before moving towards Graham. Graham pleads for mercy, mentioning his family. However, Jake is suddenly flooded with memories and chooses to spare Graham's life. However, the team arrives and Graham is murdered by Ajax. Ajax then warns Jake not to hesitate. After returning home, Jake finds it difficult to deal with his guilt and spends time crying while looking at pictures of people and drinking. Suddenly, he catches sight of masked men running outside his window, causing him to hide until they leave his house. The men search for him in all the rooms, but Jake finds a way to get away through the back door. The following day, Jake meets up with Mason and shares the entire story with him. Mason reveals that he was aware that the original Section 8 was disbanded in the 90s, and the current one is just filled with dishonored agents from the Army, CIA, FBI, and similar organizations. They also have significant contacts in the government capital, so if Jake is evading Section 8, he is in great jeopardy. Mason is not familiar with Ramsey, but he commits to making phone calls to assist. He also agrees to provide financial aid and a firearm to help Jake. Later, Jake goes back to his old home and receives a phone call from Ramsey. Ramsey wants to meet up and have a conversation to resolve their issues, but Jake declines the offer. Ramsey then reaches out to Muller and asks him to contact Locke, who is presently in hiding in Argentina. Ramsey wants Locke to assign him the task of assassinating Jake. Sometime later, Jake coincidentally meets his son's closest friend. While discussing the tragic incident, he discovers that Fresh was spotted with individuals wearing black suits, similar to secret agents in comic books before his family was murdered. Locke appears unexpectedly and starts shooting before he can gather more information. As a result, Jake swiftly pushes the child into a nearby store and then flees. Chaos spreads through the surroundings as Locke takes the lives of some innocent people, and soon afterward the police arrive, only to be shot by Locke too. Jake uses the distraction to get away, so Locke takes a police car and starts searching for him. Along the way, Locke calls Ramsey to update him on the situation. Later, Jake finds refuge at Earl's shop and reminisces about how Earl took care of him when his parents passed away. Out of nowhere, the computer starts making beep sounds to signal the team's arrival. In response, Jake and Earl swiftly arm themselves to confront the approaching team. Elias nearly shoots Jake, but Earl rapidly eliminates him. Then Brunner unexpectedly attacks Jake and they engage in a battle atop a car until Ajax interrupts by shooting at them. Brunner gets angry at his own mistake and Jake takes advantage of that moment by stabbing him with a screwdriver. As Ajax starts shooting again, Jake uses Brunner's body as protection and grabs his own gun to fight back, but he quickly runs out of bullets. Ajax has a couple of chances left, but he chooses to use them deliberately. He does this because he wants to have a physical fight with Jake once more, in order to prove that he is superior. The two men start hitting each other all around the place, and at one point Ajax attempts to stab Jake. However, he is ultimately shot by Muller. Later, Jake goes to see Earl to make sure he is all right. Earl is doing fine, and he hands over his car keys to Jake so that he can get away before the police arrive. As they drive away, Mueller mentions that she helped Jake because she wants to leave Section 8 too. Jake is skeptical about trusting her and insists on being brought to Ramsey's location. The following day, the pair reaches Montana and attempts to quietly navigate through a forest in search of Ramsey's cabin. However, just as Jake looks back, he is unexpectedly rendered unconscious. Jake has another dream about his family, and then he opens his eyes to find himself all tied up in a chair inside a room. In that room, he sees Ramsey and Mueller, who was apparently helping Ramsey in planning this trap for Jake. Ramsey tells Jake that he has something unexpected in store for him, and to Jake's astonishment, Mason enters the room, revealing that he has been working with Ramsey too. The organization required someone with Jake's abilities, so Mason informed them how to contact him. This implies that they were the ones who hired a hitman to harm Jake's family. Jake is shocked that Mason betrayed him, but Mason simply claims that Jake was wasting his talent on cars and a child. Later on, the group decides to abandon Jake, and Mason gives the money they had agreed upon to Ramsey and Mueller. Ramsey suggests that they should eliminate Jake since he poses a risk, and Mason agrees, but he hesitates. While Mueller is busy counting the money, Mason approaches Jake and sets him free, revealing the truth. He was recruited to infiltrate Section 8, and now he wants Jake's assistance to complete the task. Mason intentionally triggers the alarm, leading to the arrival of 2 guards whom they swiftly eliminate. More men continue to arrive, and the 2 friends shoot each one as they try to locate Ramsey. The situation intensifies with another round of gunfire that causes significant damage to the surroundings. Once Ramsey catches sight of them, he takes shelter with Mueller and proposes a deal to Jake. He will give him money in exchange for Mason. Jake declines the offer to shoot, so Ramsey attempts to persuade him that Mason is to blame for everything, but Jake remains unconvinced. As they argue, Mueller sneaks up and aims to shoot at Jake, but Mason intervenes, taking the bullet himself and knocking Mueller down in the process. Jake quickly goes to see how his friend is doing, while Ramsey attempts to take the money. However, Jake scares Ramsey away by firing a few shots. Soon after, Mason asks Jake to complete the task and unfortunately passes away. Right at that moment, Mueller interrupts and tries to shoot Jake, but she realizes she has run out of ammunition. They subsequently engage in a physical fight instead. After a short fight, Mason injures Jake by stabbing him in the shoulder. However, Jake cleverly uses this opportunity to turn Mason's own hand against her and ultimately ends up killing her. Later, Jake goes outside and witnesses Ramsey escaping in a car. Determined to catch him, Jake decides to take matters into his own hands by stealing a vehicle and chasing after Ramsey. However, both individuals shoot their weapons while driving recklessly. Ramsey becomes so unfocused that he ultimately crashes. Jake approaches the accident scene, and when Ramsey tries to insult him for his hesitation, Jake finally takes his life. In the evening, the police bring Jake to see General Savoy, who Mason was employed by. Savoy proposes a job and a fresh start to Jake, but Jake refuses, explaining that he has no motivation to join Savoy's team. Savoy decides to give him his business card just to be safe. Afterwards, when Jake arrives home, he is surprised to see Locke waiting for him because he is determined to complete his task and maintain his reputation. Without delay, a physical fight breaks out between the two, and they both showcase their impressive combat abilities, using anything they can find in the room to attack each other. When the conflict escalates in the kitchen, both individuals reach for a knife and continuously strike each other until Locke forcefully throws Jake down. As a result, Jake manages to grab his gun and ultimately ends up killing Locke. The following morning, Jake sends a recorded message to Earl expressing gratitude for his support and letting him know that he's leaving. Meanwhile, while Jake is on a bus, he witnesses a heartfelt moment between a mother and her son. This reminds him of his own family, and he decides to call Savoy and accept his offer. He tells Savoy that he indeed has something worth fighting for. Thank you for watching our video. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.